Welcome to episode 57 of the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast, The Art of Classical Equitation with Belinda Bolsenbroek. I think I first found out about Belinda when I came across a discussion with her and Manolo Mendez, I think on Andrew Turnball's Facebook page. So shout out to Andrew Turnball. Thank you for introducing me to Belinda, even though you probably have no idea that you did that. And side note, I would love to have Andrew on the podcast at some point as well. But anyway, when I was watching this discussion between Manolo and Belinda, a lot of the things that Belinda was saying really resonated with me. And then I looked a little bit deeper onto her website and watched some videos of her riding and thought, wow, yes, this is the essence of dressage that I'm looking for, that I'm seeking in my own riding. And I'm constantly looking for really good examples of riders who are riding dressage in a way that prioritizes partnership and in a way that it looks beautiful and enjoyable for the horse, right? So that's why I really wanted to get Belinda on today, because she embodies that so beautifully, and I wanted to share her message with more people. So who is Belinda? Belinda is an international authority on the art of classical equitation, in which the historic relationship between horse and human is expressed as a spiritual connection between two beings. Belinda harnesses the wisdom of the old masters and combines that wisdom with the science of biomechanics and shapes them both into a clear and defined practice that allows you to take your horsemanship to the next level. In this episode, we discuss Belinda's upbringing with horses, from competitive riding on Dutch warm bloods, international competition, Olympic ambitions, and her turning point towards classical dressage, Belinda's healthy and holistic approach to training horses, the evolution of competitive dressage and why many classical riders don't compete, how contact should feel when it is based on connection, not force, Belinda's interests in the thoracic sling and nervous system of the horse, the importance of reflection and questioning in your horsemanship journey, her interesting answer to the favorite horse purchase question that I ask all of the guests. I think Belinda might be starting a new trend with this one. Plus all the usual fun horsemanship breakthroughs, questions, plus so much more. What I really liked about Belinda when I spoke to her was her really calm and confident energy. And she's very clearly extremely knowledgeable and passionate about her area of expertise. And I really think, as I've said, that she's a great example of what dressage with partnership looks like. Now, apologies, we did record this episode before April, and she does talk about her online academy being launched in April, but I did have a quick look, and I don't think the membership is actually quite launched yet, so you might still be in luck if you're wanting to dive deeper. And I know she has other online offerings as well, like coaching packages and webinars if you wanted to dive deeper into her work. Plus, she does clinics all over Australia, so you can always get in touch with her. As always, let me know what you think of this episode. If you're listening and it resonates with you, reach out to me on Instagram at Amalia_horses. Take a screenshot of this episode on your phone, share on social media. The more we can get the word out about the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast, the more we can spread the word of positive and partnership-based horsemanship in the horse world. So thanks for listening, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast, a source for riding and training insights with the goal of helping your horse be a light, happy, and willing partner. I'm your host, Amalia Dempsey, a mainstream equestrian rider who discovered natural horsemanship and equine learning theory, and now I help riders like you achieve connection and communication with your horse so you can have more fun and fulfillment whilst prioritizing the partnership. Get more learning resources, including my free connection and communication mini course at amaliadempsey.com. Click the follow button so you don't miss an episode, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave me a rating and review or screenshot this episode and share on social media. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, Belinda Bolsenbroek, to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited to chat all things classical equitation.
Thank you, Amalia. It's nice to be here.
So first up, can you tell us a bit about your horsemanship journey so far, from when you got into horses and what has led to what you're doing today?
Sure. Look, I was born in a horse family, so I was very lucky that way. I come from family that's had horses. Also, even far before I was born, like my grandparents, even and before them. So it's a bit generational kind of horse lovers. And I grew up in my parents' stud farm, and they also had a riding school as I grew up, besides other businesses. And so I really started from an early age. I started in a competitive atmosphere. My father was very interested. My parents bred German warm blood horses and Dutch warm blood horses because I was in the Netherlands. And so I started with competitive riding when I was younger. And it was sort of in the time when I was picked to start training with the Olympic coach of the time to make it all the way. I had everything behind me to really start going as far as you can go. And I was doing international competition at the time. So I moved from my parents' farm to this coach to do the training, and then it was a smack in the face. My mother has a classical background in the training, and my father was of like a classical German approach in the training, so a little bit more modern, but not in any way. Always just in the mindset of really as horse lovers and want to do the best by the horses. And so when I was in that moment going outside of my own world, I guess that was the time when Ankie van Grensen was like, you know, the big winner everywhere, and where Chef Jansen was starting to really promote, particularly in the Netherlands, of course, in our environment, this low deep round training. And so I was also exposed to that, and that really, I didn't like that at all. So I literally only lasted a very short time, and because I was training on my own horse, brought one of my own stallions, and my relationship with the stallion I just could feel after 3 days he was looking at me like, I don't know what we're doing with this kind of method. And of course I didn't have the knowledge I have now, but I had enough knowledge to I did a lot of rehabilitation on horses at the time already, and on horses that come out of the sports and that needed to be helped to be either sound, both usually mentally and physically. And so I stepped away from the competition arena altogether. And then I came just because I just didn't fit with me in the practices that were asked at the time. So I was young, and so I didn't think that I wanted to have anything to do with it, to the big disappointment of my dad in particular. And I changed also my horses a little bit. I had the warm blood sports horses, and I started having my first classical breeds. So I got a PRE, a purebred Spanish horse first, and then I built on that in the Netherlands. I ended up with, I think, 5 Iberian horses and the 𝑩𝒆𝒊𝒏𝒅𝒂 and which is a classical Danish breed. And then I started training with some classical trainers. I became a knight in Ben Brandrup's academic art of riding, and then I got exposed to, just because I continued my search of learning, and I really loved Ben Brandrup's teaching for what he brought back, in that he brought back the works of the old masters and what they were teaching in a time when horse and human had to work as if they were one, as war horses and warriors. And so I liked that a lot, but I was still missing some things, and I just needed to really understand for me what is correct and how do we know that we're doing the best by our horses. Because growing up with horses, I had a close relationship with all of my animals, and so I didn't want to have any part in training that disregarded their autonomy to some respect. And so I started searching. I went to visit Gert Huysman, and he opened my world to the biomechanics. And then I did my own search on that. I developed massively on that. I built an amazing community of students and of which many are professional equine specialists. And part of that is also a small group with which we do dissections. So I've done a whole lot of learning on what's correct into the body of the horse, and also the damage that we do to horses when we're not thinking things through so well. Just the common practices cause a lot of hurt in horses. And so that's where I ended up now in my journey, that I've got an amazing group of students that are professionals in their own right, and that help me to be an ambassador for the horse.
Wow, beautiful. What an incredible journey. Something that I was thinking about as you were explaining that story was, well, for as long as I've been involved in the horse community, low, deep, round or rollker or those hyperflexion type methods have always been around. So I don't really know what the world looked like before that. And you mentioned that that sort of came into fashion, so to speak, when you were competing. What was the competition world like before that? Have you seen a change in dressage competition? And how does classical dressage differ from modern dressage or competition that we see these days?
Look, what was before that is not necessarily that it was all too brilliant as well. Like, we must remember that dressage as a competitive sport is really only just taken off in the 60s. I mean, really only taken off. First of all, Olympic dressage didn't start until I think 1925. So, and then we had the war, and then it wasn't taking off until I think 56 that there was dressage, competitive dressage, that we started getting the FEI and rules. And so we must also remember that at this time, it was a way of the first idea of starting to do competitive riding was actually just to bring people back together, to get an atmosphere of people spending time well together, not necessarily from the look of what are we doing to the horse, what are we asking of the horse. And even in the guidelines of how to perform dressage, I mean, there's been huge discussions early on in dressage to either not have piaffe and passage in there, because really no one really knew how to execute it that well, or how to actually evolve, starting to make counter canter before making a canter change. There's just all sorts of things that in the classical world, and classical world is just that what the old masters were teaching to the horses when horses were still part of an everyday life, and also part of a partner in the battlefield, where they had to be at their best, their most agile, the closest to their partner, the human. And that is what classical training should be. It's to stay in what is harmonious and natural to the horse, and to the best of its nature in the education. So I think that what we have in modern training practices is that we've lost a lot of the knowledge, and that the part of the competition has taken sort of a run of its own to perform something that is perceived as beautiful, but not necessarily as correct to the body and mind of the horse. And that's a big issue. That's why we have so much uproar and so much people fighting now, standing up saying this is not okay. These horses are hurting. These are signs of pain in the horse. And it's very important. It's an important fight, because it doesn't have to be a difference. We can actually compete with horses in a classical manner as well, in a way that is friendly and that is enjoyable for the horse as well. It's just that we need to make some big changes for that. And that has to come, first of all, with knowledge, because no one starts hurting horses for joy. People get carried away when it's about winning, but it's also a complete misunderstanding of the animal and what's their spirit. So, and that's what I'd like to change. So in hindsight, I stepped away from it, because at the time, Walker was really popular, it was a way to create better scoring, and the horses were starting to show more extravagant movement because basically they're being pulled apart. And obviously we know now that how severely they break down from those training practices, or most people are sort of aware of that. Before that, they had problems with horses that were being stiff and rigid, and that also had some issues, that had joint wear because their suspension systems weren't working. So it was just a way of trying to find a better way of getting the horse move through the body, elasticity, and to move through the back, as they like to call it, right? With a complete misconception of what that really is, because there's no scientific baseline behind the training approaches, if that makes sense. And luckily, that's where we're coming to now, is that we are getting a much better backup of science, and so the research is showing us what's right and what's wrong. And we also have the other part of it, where we're becoming more aware of the spirit of the horse and how to listen to horses better.
Yes, and I think deep down, most dressage riders really do want that connection and that partnership with their horse, and they wouldn't intentionally want to do dressage in a way that would hurt their horses. However, I feel like in the mainstream kind of competition world, we don't have a whole lot of, classical dressage or really excellent examples of what dressage can be like. So when I watch videos of you on your website, Belinda, I go, yes, this is what dressage should be like. But we don't, it's not mainstream. We don't see it a lot. And I think perhaps is that because we don't see those riders in competition, so they're not kind of being those role models for the younger generations. Do you think that is? And why do you think many classical trainers don't compete in competition?
It's quite simple. It's because if you are, because it's not important on their mind, because they're riding for the horse, not for an accomplishment that is judged by other people. So I think that's why you don't see them so much in competition. If there is people that do, like I've done it myself. I've also taught riders that are like heavily, or teach riders that are competing, but I've taught riders right at the top, and it's difficult because you have to compromise, because the knowledge is not there, and so there's always compromise for the horse being made. And that's at that point in the world, it's accepted. So when you say, like, also, of course, you're absolutely right. What we're both discussing is that riders in the competitive world, they're not necessarily out to hurt their horses. It's just that we're come to a place where they're living in a parallel existence of their horse, and where things that should be viewed upon as being abusive are not looked at all. There's an oversight because it's been done that way for a certain amount of time, and so it's okay that you kick your horse, you whip your horse, you use heavy spurs, you hang on the mouth. It's okay that the tongue's blue. Oh, really? Does that hurt the horse? There's a lot of misconception, oversight, and just also some ignorance, because really today we should all be looking for the answers. There's so much more knowledge out there now. So I think it's just a matter of time. Those things will change. And when those things will change, I'm sure that there will be classical riders that will also like to show that in a competitive setting to some extent. It's much harder to do competition on a form of when you approach something in the classical, because it is a continuous learning experience between you and the horse. So a rider, a true classical rider, is riding their horses for the horse on every day when they are in the arena, or when they're out on the trail or whatever it is. And so there wouldn't be a set pattern per se to do something so much, because as in riding from A to B and doing certain things, right, is what I mean. Just as in the exercises performed, as when a classical rider is riding the horse, they might want to change the exercises as it feels to what the horse is needing at the time, and therefore gets to a greater level of competence, strength, balance, and equilibrium, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of people aren't. They still perhaps are listening and going, oh, this sounds great, but I actually don't really know what that looks or feels like. Could you tell us perhaps a summary of your training approach or philosophy with horses, and what good classical dressage should feel like when you're riding?
Well, first of all, that is, of course, for everybody their own personal journey with their horse, because that's where it starts. It's a partnership between you and the horse. It's quite amazing that we can sit on, that we're allowed to sit on this animal, and that the animal, the horse, will actually enjoy the partnership as much as we do when we are taking a correct approach to that. And that means, first of all, to take full responsibility for what you decide to do with your horse. Because at the end of the day, that's how it works. Everybody that owns a horse is the decision maker of the life of that horse. And so for me, that means that you are always reflecting on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and is it improving the life and well-being of your horse, or is it not? And that's the two choices, and we should obviously always take the first one, right? For the approach in training, the first essential understanding is, what does your horse look like? What's your horse conformation? And what is the healthy form of movement to carry a rider for your horse, if you wish to ride your horse? Because I have riders, or I have students, I should say, that don't ride their horses and want to do just groundwork and educate their horses on the ground. And that's just as much a beautiful journey, if that is what someone wants to do, or if it's better for the horse because we have a compromised horse. So it doesn't have a set pattern as such, but when you understand, first of all, what is in the nature of your horse by understanding their conformation, and then also understanding their compensation patterns of movement, their natural crookedness, the parts in the body that might already be under a little bit of stress, to help the horse and be like a therapist to your horse, to expand your knowledge so that you know what movement to pick. Because every movement in dressage has a purpose. It has come to a form in an dressage exercise to help the horse to release blockages and strengthen and balance their body to move well under a rider. That's what the purpose of dressage is. So that's the other part of the training, is to understand all these different exercises, when to use them and what to do with them. And of course, the most important part of this relationship between horse and rider is that partnership, and that is that for me, it's extremely important in the training to keep a level of autonomy for the horse. That means that we keep a voice for the horse, that we create a wool horse, and that means that we don't take any submissive practices. So there's no place in the training for telling a horse what to do because he also just needs to toughen up and do what he needs to do, or her. We don't do that, because horses are very submissive by nature, and they will try to do whatever it is their human wants unless they can't. And horses that are playing up and are considered to be dangerous or naughty are horses that are suffering, and because they've been misunderstood and they haven't been able to communicate their suffering to the owners of the time, or wherever they're placed. So that is part of my education, that I want to keep that autonomy. A horse needs to be able to tell the person to say no, and because it's able to tell the person I can't do that, it's in a very subtle and soft way. So animal communication is a big part of my training as well. So it doesn't show itself in a horse that always says no, or that you cannot do anything with, or a bucking horse. Far from it. I've had absolute amateur riders start their own horses through clinics and through their own journey by building on that relationship, and never have a moment of danger. So, and I believe that as well, to actually train your horse from the beginning as much as you can, all by yourself, and create your relationship with the horse, just you and your horse. So that's my practice, and with that we can bring it to the absolute highest levels of education. I've trained riders, and of course myself as well. I bring horses to the high school movements. They can do all the Grand Prix movements, and I have show jumpers, eventers in my amongst my students. So it doesn't mean that you can't choose a discipline. It means that the basic is the most important, the foundation, that we start correct with those ingredients.
Yes, love that you mentioned that. And I feel like it sounds like that really this dressage, the way that you do it is really for the horse. It's setting that foundation. It's based on partnership, and everything you do is really to help the horse be a better version of themselves physically and mentally. That's sort of what I'm gathering from what you're saying with your philosophy and approach with horses. And I'm sure that along your journey and all the research you've done, all the experience that you've had probably many breakthroughs. What has been your biggest horsemanship breakthrough to date?
Oh, look, there's been so many of them, of course. There's the discoveries that you make, and then the confirmation of other specialists that come up with the same ideas, as if there is a secret word out in the universe and all of a sudden people talk about the same thing. That happens all the time. Like when I was many years ago, I started working I started understanding the functioning of the body and the importance of the thoracic sling, and how it functions, how it balances the horse. And it was never mentioned as such. And all of a sudden, also within my own community, or in an indirect community, like Gert Huysman, for example, wrote an amazing book about that thoracic sling functioning. It's only a very small little book, but it was just right when I had been teaching it for about a year, I would say, that his little book came out and explained it in a book form. And so those are really big breakthroughs, because they have fast forwarded the journey for everyone in my community and in also the wider world, because a lot of people, and as I said, it's just serendipity in that, right? Like, it's not that I've invented it at all. It's just that it seems to be that through the research that everybody's doing, we're often falling in the same discoveries. And then for me, up to date now, another big one of the most important structures for me, as I find the way for horses back to soundness, is that I understand the functioning of the spinal column and the nervous system, and that I understand the importance of space in the body. And it's a very difficult topic, I guess, that in somewhat it might not be the appropriate time to just go too deep into that, because I'm sure you had lots of other things to talk about. But to find space and to how to recognize nerve dysfunction to in the neural pathways, and nerve impingement or damage, and how this can be birth trauma and ridden trauma, right? And or injury trauma. It can be from every way. Once you understand that, what I have discovered is that I can help people with their horses, from a completely dysfunctional and lame horse, to create a sound moving horse in moments, by realigning the body without force, letting the horse find the space in the body, and therefore creating the alignment so that the nervous system can work properly. That's a huge discovery that goes deeper in the understanding of movement again, and I'm so happy I can help horses that way.
Yeah, wow, that is fascinating. And I did have a little stalk on your website, and I saw that you've got a few online offerings. Do you teach any of this? If people want to go deeper into those areas, Do you teach any of this online, or would they need to go into a clinic with you? How can they find out more about this?
I have an online platform. It's also about to launch. We're going to launch in April. Properly, we have courses that will come up, like full educational courses that will cross all of the topics and lessons. And then I also offer online masterclass. There are only a few times a year now because they're bigger events, but where people can actually come in and experience and ask questions online, and I'll be live, and we'll talk about it. I also have a number of clinics that I do. Now, for example, I will be a month in Australia in March, and hold clinics, and then I will be back again towards the more of the end of the year for a similar thing. And then I have a lot of students that also, once we have our platform online, my students that are also coaches are able to help people on the ground as well. So on my platform, that is already there. You've been through the website a little bit, but at this moment it's very silent because I have a very large student base and I can't help everybody at the same time. But in this way, I will start to bring that knowledge and make it available to people to learn in their own time frame. And the biggest reason for doing that is because I want to empower horse owners to actually be able to have the answers, so that they're not, because I think one of the biggest reasons of the things that we spoke about before, why people go in the wrong direction, why their horses start to have issues mentally and physically, is because you just don't know. You're just out and lost in the forest somewhere, and there's so many people that offer to advise you, often contradicting each other. And so that's what I aim. My biggest goal is to empower people to have the right answers, because they can find the correct answers on a platform like mine that is evidence-based research and material on how to then move that research into actually working with your horse.
Fantastic. I think we'll all be keeping an eye out for your next launches. And on the note of people needing those answers because of, I guess, a lack of knowledge, what is something that you wish that every horse owner would do differently?
Every is, of course, always hard to say, but to reflect always, to take a moment to question everything that you're asked to do with your horse. If things don't go well, to take a step back and to take a moment to recompose yourself and the situation with your horse, and to listen to your horse, most of all, because they're just trying to tell you something if things aren't going so right. And I think then above all is I would like an owner to feel empowered enough to know that you are responsible for your horse. You own it. You make the decisions from the moment you get it to the moment it will pass on. And therefore, it's your journey. So no one else should tell you what to do with your horse or how to do it. The only one that you are responsible for and that you have to explain yourself to is your horse and yourself. So to make that journey pleasant and to be honest in that way and say, to enjoy the journey, that's, I think, is really important, because I think that people sometimes get rushed out of that by other people, the pressure of other people. So I wish that for horse owners that you feel completely in your right to enjoy your journey with your horse, whatever it may be, and as long as it is enhancing your life and that of the horse.
That's a beautiful message. And I also wish that more horse people would, I guess, really own that responsibility for their horse and really be their horse's advocate, because they can, you can trust yourself to make your own decisions about your horse's training, as long as you're putting the horse first. So very cool. And what do you think makes a happy horse?
A happy horse is a horse that is not exposed to discomfort every time it sees the human that they're so connected to.
Yes.
That sounds a little bit disencouraging, but the fact is that most horses have to go through discomfort in their relationship with their human, and they have a very close connection with their human. They want to be heard, and they actually want to do the right thing. So a happy horse is a horse that's understood. And that means that, of course, on the side of that, we also provide their natural way of life. They have the right kind of living circumstances, that they are socially kept as a happy horse, and that they are getting the right foods, that they don't suffer from that. But most importantly, our horses will always live somewhat of an unnatural life in a way, but they have also been with us for centuries. So it's not like they would be much better off if all of a sudden they'd have to be sent out in the wilderness. Most of them would die. They do want to be in that. They're there and they enjoy the connection. But yeah, it's the happy horse is the horse that doesn't have to hold on to pain because of accidentally ill practices of their human. And I mean, that's not just being rough. It means I'm talking about everything. How's your halter fitting? How's your saddle fitting? How are the feet of your horse? How do you approach the horse? Do you ask for consent in your horse before you do anything?
Yes. So yeah, really taking that to that deep level, it's not, like you say, it's about how you do everything. Is the halter fitting, and the holistic view of their health, how you're approaching them, that consent that you talk about. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that you bring all those different aspects together to explain that happy horse dynamic. That's I watching videos of you, to me the horses look happy in their work. And another thing that stands out that I also see in other classical dressage riders is the contact is so light. It looks like it's just almost just the weight of the reins. And obviously contact is a big topic in the horse world right now. What is your definition of contact, and how should it feel when riding horses of various levels?
Well, that is because it is a very important topic, and you're right. And I'd like to reflect back to you, because I've seen some beautiful images of you riding with a cordeo ring. How's your contact?
Well, yeah.
And I have students that ride with cordeo rings. I have students that ride on with bitless bridles. I have all sorts of variety of students that ride with a double bridle or ride on a curb bit. I have students that ride on snaffles, and it depends, but everything is the same. Contact is always the same. Contact is connection.
Yes.
And so that's the first thing that we need to all understand, is that contact is connection, and that means that there is no force. So if you have weight in your rein or on the mouth of the horse, you are impairing the freedom of the horse and the way of movement. Now, we need to shape the horse if we want to ride it well, because if we sit on it without shaping it, it will actually break down. It's not able to carry us in a healthy way if we just think that we can just plop ourselves on the back and ride with a completely loose rein and let the horse find its own way, because we will break down its effect that 95% of horses or something like that have kissing spine, right? So when at some stage of their riding career, and most horses start creating kissing spine at the age of 6. That's the question there, right? Because we're talking about immature bodies. So deformity is very common, and that's by strong contact or by no contact whatsoever. If we don't shape the horse, if we don't understand what's healthy framing, then we are also hurting the horse. But coming back to the contact is connection. And if you're riding on a bit, the contact on the bit, as in the the feeling of your fingers on the bit should be only as much as the ability to feel the tongue underneath the bit. If you're riding on the nose, then the contact should be only as much as feeling that you have a leather strap over the nose and that you can take an influence in bringing the horse's head to one position or the other when you ask. And that when it doesn't work or you get resistance, the context diminishes again rather than increases. If you ride on a Cordeo ring, sometimes, and I'm sure you've experienced this, contact can be a little bit more, in the way of the Cordeo ring, can be a little bit more dense. So as in you're putting the ring on the neck. And so as the horse is learning, you might have to have a little bit more of pressure in a moment, but again, if the pressure is met with resistance, then the ring should fall immediately. Then your horse is not ready, right? And when the ring is well used, then the contact is feather light.
Yeah,
it is just nearly just a moving over that you're taking from the chest. So contact should be always as light as possible and be in the flow of motion of the horse so that it can be soft. It's all about suspension. It's all about ease. So contact should be like that too.
Yes, and I think that is what I love so much about riding in the Cordeo. We call it a neck rope, but I know a lot of people call it Cordeo as well. But because it feels so light, it feels so free, and it's not a continuous pressure, so to speak. And also, you know, when you were saying if you have resistance with the Cordeo, you must let go, because, well, it's not going to work anyway, even if you do increase the pressure with a Cordeo, because well, you haven't got a lot to back up that kind of cue. So yeah, I think that's what I love about riding in a neck rope or Cordeo, and I think that ultimately I would love to be able to feel that in a closer or more fine connection with a bit and a bridle as well, not just in the Cordeo. That is something that I'm seeking myself too. So I also wanted to touch on, I know you've had many amazing influences, mentors in your life in the horse world, but if you could have dinner with any 3 horse people, dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, I would choose only dead people at this point. So just because if I would want to have dinner with someone that I'm really interested in that is alive today, I'll probably reach out and try and make that happen actively as well. And because I really believe in connection and exposing, you know, yourself for endless learning. So if I could have a choice, I would go much further back in time when people were still training horses to the highest level of communication with their humans to perform as a war horse in close combat. So not as like horses that were, you know, people that were shooting on each other, because that's when it already started to change. But, you know, so I would go early on, and I would not per se take a person, and I would love to have a look at the very first riders, the shepherds that would just, you know, be on the back of the horses and carry on and see what it was like, how history evolved, and if I would be in a possibility to have a proper conversation and learning experience, I would definitely want to see Pluvinel, which was in the 1500s, 1600s, like 1555, 1620. And then because I think he very early on, he was still right in that time frame, and, you know, he had certain practices that were unique, that made him unique, good or bad, but I would like to know why and how. De la Gurnière was a great master in France in the high days of riding, for the art of riding, but still obviously reflecting to the purpose of it. That was in 1700. And then in exactly the same time frame, there was the Marquis of Marialva, who was in Portugal, and who had classical, like who was, you know, a classical master, like, and also had a real understanding of lightness and the entire functioning of the body. So when I read about him, and also his student Andrade wrote left an amazing book about bringing the horse, understanding the functioning of the hind, lifting the front, etc. So I would have loved to see in real life how deep their knowledge was. That's the ones I choose. That was 3.
Yeah, wow. And was that book that you mentioned, has that been translated to English?
No, sadly not.
So many of the good books that people recommend are not in English.
I would say.
Do you have any favorite horse books or resources in English?
More and more it's definitely worth it to search online for the names of the masters, right? So that you can, as an English person, if you don't have French or Spanish up your sleeve, that you can just copy and paste the name and search for it. And have a research for it, because there are many universities that are actually, these books don't have copyright, right? Because it's before a certain time frame. So there is some translation starting to happen just from a historic viewpoint of universities that you can find in English. So you have to go online and search for them, and maybe they're not completely bound, like not completely put as a book, but maybe you can find parts of it. François Robuchon de la Gournière, like the Frenchman that wrote about the art of horsemanship, his book has been very well translated in English. It's not always available, and it's not. These are classical books, so you have to fork out a bit of money to get one. But there's a very good translation of his work in English. The other ones are sadly mostly in their original language or in German, because in Germany we have some really amazing publishers that focus on historic classical books and classical libraries. So they don't have. Pluvinel, I don't think is in English either.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, have a look. Go online.
Excellent. I'm sure that listeners will do that also. And this is a bit of a fun question. What has been your favorite horse-related purchase in the last 12 months?
A deerskin.
Deerskin?
Yes.
As in,
I love
breeches with deerskin on them, or I don't know what you mean.
So I have a bit of a thing about deerskins on horses for riding purposes. So I have most of my regular students own a reindeer skin. And I teach people, and including myself, because I've worked a lot with rehabilitation. I work a lot with severe rehabilitation horses that have had strong damages neurologically, physically, like in muscle, bone, all of the structures of the horse, and mentally, and often with ill-fitting saddles and tech. A great way to rehabilitate a horse that's had an ill-fitting saddle is to ride without the saddle, so that you can help to build the correct framing. Of course, a big part of it's in hand. But coming back to the reindeer skin, reindeer hair is hollow, and so deer hair is hollow, right? And reindeer skin is quite thick, so it creates the most natural gel pad for your horse that you can imagine. It's like a shock absorption between a rider and the horse. And because of the movement of the hair, it's even a fascia release. It brings fascia release in horses. So it stimulates circulation while you're riding your horse. So I buy a skin. I cut it in half usually, because they're usually quite big. And then I place it on the horse with the hair side down. And then I hop on the horse and I ride the horse without a girth, so that the horse can fully breathe and use its diaphragm. And of course, therefore, it is an amazing tool to help my students to become good riders. Because if you're hanging on or you're starting to get lopsided, you will come off really quickly. It's very slippery. But if you're sitting in balance it's quite amazing how secure you'll feel on the horse. So deerskin is my favorite purchase, and also one of the last purchases as I was moving overseas, back from Australia. I wanted to have some new material here. Deerskins.
Yeah, wow. I have never heard of that before. You might be starting a new trend. Next minute, everyone's riding with deerskins, but it totally makes sense in terms of
I have already a little bit.
the less equipment you have, the less. When you first said it, I was like, hang on a second, what? I was picturing like deerskin. You know how sometimes there's breeches with leather, like a leather seat. I was thinking maybe a deerskin seat. I'm not sure, but anyway, I think
No,
that
it's
yeah, the less support we have from our saddles, you know, a lot of modern dressage saddles have big knee rolls and really deep seats, but I think you're very humbled quite quickly when you ride without those things and you realize, oh, actually my seat needs a bit of work here. So yeah, sounds like you're onto something with the deerskin.
Yeah, the deerskin is amazing for that. And I mean, it's an incredible tool that helps to establish an honest partnership, because if the rider can't do it, why ask it of the horse? So if you're on a deerskin, it becomes really honest that whatever's not working is usually your own problem, not necessarily that of the horse. And if it is the horse's problem, then it's become the horse's problem because you were both not ready. It doesn't have to be a negative. That's actually a positive. And it's quite amazing when people start riding on a deerskin. And I'm not saying chuck all the saddles away. I say use it as a tool for rehabilitation if you have problems in the back of the horse, and use it as a tool to refine your riding. And personally, I prefer deerskin over any saddle. And as I said before, there shouldn't be a girth attached to it either, because it will help the horse incredibly if it can freely move underneath a rider, and it will help a rider's balance. So deerskins are super amazing for that. And yeah, I have like pretty much every student of mine owns a deerskin, and I have many coaches that are, you know, students, and so their students have deerskins, and so it is becoming a bit of a thing.
Oh, wow.
So it's a crazy deerskin brigade, but I hope that it will become more practice outside of my direct community, because it's an incredible tool.
People will be wanting to buy deerskin off of your website now, so you might need to set something up there. And
you can send me a question.
I was going to say, you have already achieved so much with horses, but I'd love to know, what is your ultimate goal with horses?
My ultimate goal is to make a better life for horses. So my ultimate goal is also my next step that I'm taking right now, and that is that you know, creating a wide-reaching platform online to reach that goal, so that I can make a better world for horses. That's my ultimate goal. Personally, I enjoy the journey with my horses. I've done so many things. I can educate horses for myself. My own personal pleasure is always to take the partnership to the highest level of communication and performance as possible. That's where the performance is, you know, interlinked. But when it comes to, in essence, what I really want to do within the world of horses, it's that, to create a better world for horses. And they're humans.
Yes.
Because they have a better life too, and better enjoyment out of their partnership. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that you're bringing that to the online space, because you'll be able to impact more and more people. Before we wrap up today's interview and just touch base again about where people can find out about you, what is the one message that you would like our listeners to take from today's interview?
I hope that I can help you to create some awareness on good approaches, and I hope that the people, whoever is listening, that you'll have a look at yourself and your relationship, and that you can question on approaches, that hopefully somewhere in the conversation there were little things, maybe the deerskin, maybe the contact or whatever it was, or maybe what makes a horse happy, that you are able to take that journey further for you and your horse. And then above all, to really enjoy this amazing experience that we have every day when we have the grace of our horses that we have such an amazing bond with, to really enjoy that journey and not get caught up in the idea that you need to achieve anything, because everyone, even a professional to some extent, is working on a hobby. So that partnership is the most important thing, and I hope that it will help you somewhere on the journey, and maybe give you some answers and clarity to say, yes, I know that something wasn't right. I would love to go and research now further, and I'm going to find the answer, instead of being told by other people that I'm just making things up or my horse just needs to carry on. So that I hope that people can take that away from what you're doing as well, Melly. I think you're bringing something beautiful together too. So
thank you so much. That is my mission also. I hope that people get a lot out of these podcasts, and I think they've definitely got a lot out of today's interview. Lots of little things to take away, and often if it's just that one little thing that we can change in someone's mind, that can make all the difference in their horses and their happiness. So that's what this is all about. Now, let's touch base again on where our listeners can find out more about you and your upcoming courses, your website, Facebook, etc. Please let us know, and I'll also put all the links in the show notes to this episode also.
Yes, sure. So we're on social media, Belinda Bolsenbroek Academy. That's also my website. You can find me there. And if you'd like to have some help or be pointed in the right direction, you can email, you can message through the social media presence, and hopefully you'll be getting on a journey with either me or one of my students, or however it comes about, you'll be able to find more on those things. So as I said before, my platform for online courses, for finding your own study material to learn from me, on easy lessons that you can follow. That's all going to launch in April, towards the end of April. We're working really hard on that right now with an amazing team of professionals. So I'm really excited to share that with you in a little bit. And then if you can keep an eye on the website, that's going to all be coming soon, really, really soon. So.
Perfect. Well, Belinda, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. All things horsemanship, classical dressage, deer skins, and so much more. I hope we can connect again in the future. And thank you again so much for coming on today.
Thank you too. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast. Make sure you hit the follow button so you get notified every time a new episode is released. And if you've learned even just one small thing from today's show, I would really appreciate if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts, or screenshot this episode and share it on social media. You can connect with me on Instagram at Amalia_horses, or my website amaliadempsey.com, where you can find free resources to help you on your horsemanship journey. That's all for today. Thanks for being here. Remember to train with kindness and ride with excellence, and I'll see you in the next episode.